She had done nothing wrong. She had harmed no one. But in the spring of 1692, her name was spoken in a courtroom, and from that moment, nothing would ever be the same. In Salem, Massachusetts, during the cold months of 1692, fear transformed neighbors into enemies. What began as a local disturbance quickly spiraled into a colony-wide panic, trapping more than 200 people in a web of suspicion. 20 would lose their lives to the executioner or the harsh confines of prison. While the terror spared no one, it was women who carried the heaviest burden. Society looked upon widows, midwives, and folk healers with quiet unease, viewing their independence and traditional knowledge as signs of dark pacts. In this devout community, a whisper of witchcraft served as an instant conviction. The moment an accusation left a neighbor's lips, a woman's social ties, her safety, and her standing vanished. Before a single witness spoke under oath, her life was already ruined. At 34 years old, Margaret lived a quiet life on the forest edge of Salem Village. Widowed young, her days revolved around her modest timber home and her young son, Thomas, who was her only close family. To the villagers, she was a source of quiet comfort and warmth. Margaret was a healer, skilled in gathering wild nettle, foxglove, and elderberry from the woods to soothe winter fevers and ease the pains of childbirth. She delivered her remedies alongside soft, earnest prayers, practicing a devout faith that her neighbors held in high regard. For years, local families welcomed her into their homes during times of sickness and grief, trusting her knowledge and her gentle spirit. In a harsh land where survival was never guaranteed, her quiet care and devotion made her a trusted part of Salem life, long before the whispers of witchcraft began. In late winter, the quiet of the forest edge shattered. A neighbor's young daughter fell into violent, inexplicable fits, her body contorting as if gripped by invisible hands. During a fevered spasm, the child looked past her weeping mother, pointed a trembling finger toward the woods, and screamed Margaret's name. The word rippled through the village. What had once been gratitude for Margaret's healing prayers curdled into suspicion. Rumors grew in the corners of the meeting house, transforming her solitary walks into late-night conjurings. Seeking only to understand the rising tension, young Thomas repeated a simple phrase he heard his mother whisper by the hearth about a sick child's spirit. In the hands of frightened neighbors, a boy's innocent confusion became damning proof. They reframed Margaret's gentle remedies as malicious poison, and her comforting prayers as dark incantations. In a community gripped by panic, a child's protective love was weaponized, turning a son's words into the very evidence that would tear his mother from him. At dawn, the heavy iron latch of Margaret's door rattled and burst open. Constables stepped into the cold timber home, pulling her from her bed and separating her from her weeping 7-year-old son, Thomas, who clung to her woolen skirt. By mid-morning, she stood in the center of the packed Salem Village meeting house. The room pressed in, crowded with neighbors she had known for a decade, women whose children she had delivered, and men who had helped repair her roof, now watched her with cold, fearful eyes. Magistrates. John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin sat at the elevated bench, looking down with sharp, probing eyes. They did not begin with grand accusations of devilry. Instead, they dissected her everyday life. They demanded to know why she gathered wild nettle, foxglove, and elderberry in the quiet hours of the morning. They questioned her solitary walks along the forest edge, framing her need for quiet reflection as late-night conjurings. Margaret stood straight, holding her head high. Her voice remained steady and clear. She calmly told the court that she used God's plants only to ease pain, and that her prayers were spoken to heaven alone. But in the rising panic of the courtroom, her explanations were swept away. Her healing remedies were recast as slow poison. Her soft prayers were reinterpreted as dark incantations. In a matter of hours, Every quiet act of mercy that defined her life was stripped of its goodness, turned upside down, and offered to her community as damning proof of evil. In the damp, crowded cells of the Salem jail, a terrible bargain was offered to every prisoner. A confession of witchcraft meant life. The court spared those who admitted guilt, viewing their lies as repentance. But for those who refused to lie, the only path left was the gallows. Margaret faced this choice in the dark. To confess would mean returning home to her 7-year-old son, Thomas. It would mean holding him again, feeling his small hand in hers, and watching him grow. But it also meant signing her name to a lie, betraying her faith, and surrendering her soul to save her body. She refused to yield. When brought back before the magistrates, Margaret did not plead for her life through falsehoods. Instead, she spoke of her years of quiet devotion and the neighbors she had helped. She reminded the court of the cold winters she spent tending to the sick, the childbed fevers she had cooled with wild elderberry, and the prayers she had whispered over their dying kin. She appealed to the shared trust they had built over a decade. In the back of the meeting house, a young mother whose child Margaret had delivered stood to speak for her, but her voice was instantly cut short. The magistrates warned the room that anyone defending an accused witch would face the same heavy chains. Fear silenced the room, leaving Margaret entirely alone. Back in her cell, with a scrap of paper and a stub of charcoal, Margaret wrote to her son, "My sweet Thomas, may the Almighty protect you. I am innocent before the Eternal Father. Do not let them teach you to hate my memory. Keep your heart clean, and remember that your mother chose the truth, even when the world chose fear." On September 22, 1692, the Court of Oyer and Terminer delivered its final, inevitable verdict: guilty. Margaret met the sentence not with tears, but with the quiet grace of a woman who knew her soul remained clean. On the barren slope of Gallows Hill, she faced the rope with her head held high, holding fast to the truth she refused to betray. Back in the village, 7-year-old Thomas was left utterly alone. He was no longer just an orphan. He was branded, carrying the heavy, whispering stain of being a witch's son. In the months that followed, the fever of the trials began to break, leaving behind a cold, heavy silence. Neighbors looked at the empty timber home on the forest edge, a slow regret creeping into the community. But their belated remorse could not mend a broken family, nor could it bring a mother back to her child. The tragedy of Salem reached far beyond the borders of Massachusetts. In 1782, a Swiss maidservant named Anna Goeldi was executed for witchcraft, marking Europe's last official condemnation. She was beheaded after her wealthy employer accused her of supernatural poisoning. It took until 2008 for the local government to formally clear her name, acknowledging the trial as a state-sanctioned injustice. This century-long span reveals how many women like Margaret were never cleared at all. Their names were lost to history, leaving their families to carry a silent, generational grief that no official apology could ever heal. Margaret's quiet courage lives on whenever we stand against collective fear. She and Thomas remind us that every erased life deserves to be remembered, restoring the dignity history tried to steal. Please subscribe to help us remember more of these forgotten stories